Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our crash course. Can everyone hear me?
Yes,
Yes, good morning.
Okay, so welcome. Welcome. I will basically call your name just to make sure you're able to hear and see the screen, which is very important. All right, so it's like a little roll. The meeting is being recorded. I've decided to record it because it's a Sunday and I do know there are other subjects students have to attend and a lot of things that are also important. All right, so let's start with the little rule. All right, so Christy, Abraham.
Abraham.
All right. Brent, Martin,
Present, Miss.
Francesca,
Present, Miss.
Kari Lopez,
Present, Miss.
Talia, all right, Talia, not hearing from you. Cherise.
Present, Miss.
All right, so there's a few that still have to join the meeting, but I'm going to begin promptly. You're not required to put on your webcam. Today, you should be as comfortable as possible. You should have a designated area, designated space for your studies. Now it's 8 hours, 9 to 5. We are going to have an hour lunch. So that will be at 12. Also, we will have two 15-minute breaks. One will be around 9:30 and the other will be around 2:30 or 3. All right, so we need to, now in that break time, it's very important to take your eyes off the screen, take a little walk, get a cup of coffee, tea, some kind of caffeinated beverage, water if need be. I would like you to be hydrated. I would like you to be attentive, focused. This is a crash course, so it's a lot of things that are going to be discussed. We have to look at the broad topic CXC sent. We have to look at paper 1, paper 2. How many people here are private candidates?
I'm a private candidate, Miss.
Right, I know Talia is one. Talia is a student of mine. All right, so we have about 3 people. Okay, I see in the hands. So I will have to give you a little insight into that paper 3, seeing that it's the first year they are introducing that component. This is the first year they introduce the SBA for those who are in public schools. So I hope that the others who are in a school were able to complete the SBA timely and were able to get every component completed. All right. So for those who don't know me, my name is Miss Bahau. I have been teaching for the past 8 years. Crash courses is something I've introduced since the pandemic, I would say. And it has helped a lot. It has helped people from all areas. They were able to log in and they were able to grasp the information in a timely manner as well. And they had the resources and they had everything ready and more prepared for that exam. I decided not to push back the exam too much because the crash course too much, because I know it's important for you to take all the tools, all that you have learned today, and put it into your own study regimen. Another thing, well, CXC push back the exam, so you have a lot of time to play with. That's a good thing. Now, that's also a very, how to say, risky thing too. Some people just get carried away when they hear time. They hear they have time. I would suggest, and this is just a little advice I would share with you. You can actually have like a little widget on your screen showing you how much screen time you spend on your phone. And well, this This one actually tells you which program, which apps you're spending or you're wasting time on. And it can be used like a tool to measure your cutoff time. Now, I'm not saying don't go on your phone and these kind of things. Some people use phones for the benefit of joining a class or what have you for the education. How many people here using a phone for the class? No one, okay. So I would like you to put away your phone, put it on silent, and put it out of your area. All right, I would recommend you to do that. You really want to spend as much, you really want to have that focus time. You don't want to break your focus because a message coming in on WhatsApp or TikTok or whatever, you know. I know these social media apps is sucking out your time, which you can spend it more productively. Like I said, that screen timer really shows you are losing a lot of time and it is just being spent on social media. Now, some things that I have personally done when I was a student would be, now I'm not saying to come off all social media and be, come off everything. What you could do, you could still have your profile, but you could just remove it from your phone. You just take off the app for that time frame when you have your exams, just take it off, and then when exams is over, you could put it back on. All right, because a lot of people I have seen, they will have the time, they will, they have everything set for them to prepare themselves for the exam, but because they couldn't manage their time wisely, it really, they really regret that. So please, you have now till your exam. Now I post the dates of the exam on the group just so you can see it clear and quickly. Your paper 1 is June 20th. All right. Your paper 2, which is what we are really focusing on today, is June 8th. And then your paper 3 is June 20th. All right. So you should have like a little desk calendar counting down the days and having a plan on what you have to complete before that day. And I know a lot of you are doing other subjects as well. So you need to have some kind of balance with all the subjects. All right. So I'm going to take off the webcam. I'm going to go straight to the PowerPoint. I hope everyone is seeing clearly. Now you are free to unmute yourself if you have a question. If there's something you need me to repeat, you can say so. All right, you can raise your hand, you can unmute yourself. All right, I will leave the floor open. And let's try to make it as active and you have to participate. Now, the other thing is you will be doing some questions for me. So you should have like folder pages ready, a blank, some paper ready, some book or what have you to write on. Also, I want to show you where to get the resources. So I would have sent you some links for Google Classroom. The Google Classroom is what I'm going to post some papers and questions to work on. The Google Drive, which is the resource where all the past papers are found. So I have paper 1 and I have paper 2 in folders. That is what you're using for practice. All right, and then this PowerPoint will be shared on the Google Classroom after. So those are the things to look out for. Your Google Classroom to get the notes, questions, the past paper link from the Google Drive for which you're going to use to practice. The notes and everything will be in this PowerPoint. All right, and that will be shared. All right, anybody have any questions before I begin?
No, miss.
All right, okay. Okay, so I'm going to share some advice on answering the multiple choice questions, your structured and your extended response questions as well. So your multiple choice is your paper 1, your structured and extended will be in your paper 2. Now CXC send you the topics. They sent all the topics that come in. This is something new that they have done since the pandemic began. Actually, the first batch of students, that first year when the pandemic hit, that was the students writing in 2020. They were the lucky batch. They only had to do a paper one. Well, HSB had to do a paper 1 and 2. But after that, they start sending topics. Before, people used to have to learn every single thing. I'm not saying that you as well have to learn every single topic in the syllabus because your paper 1 is every single topic. All right, despite they send you the topics for paper 2, you still need to learn everything to be prepared for your paper 1. So just keep that in mind. We are also going to look at the paper 2s, in particular the topics that they sent. And of course, we are going to practice the paper 1s. All right, so that's basically the plan for today. Just a little reminder of the format of the exam. So you have your paper 1, which is 60 multiple choice questions to be completed in 1 hour and 15 minutes. Now, time is important in the exam. Don't feel like when you finish, you're gone, you leave the exam room, you want to go and meet up with your friends after. Use every single time, every single minute counts. There are going to be errors that you have on that paper, and you need to use the time to find out what error you did and fix it. All right, until time is called. Especially a paper 2. You have 4 structured questions where number 1, the first question is an investigative or practical type of question. So you're going to see it have a graph. You have to do a table. Yeah, you maybe have to do like a bar graph, right? So that is that first question is very long and is worth about 25 marks. So you need to really practice those style of questions as well, which we will go through the graph again. Then you have your 2 extended response questions. These questions you have to really write. You have to write for your answers. You have to present your points in an orderly fashion. You need to look at the marks and you need to write according to the marks. A lot of people don't do well in this area because they just give vague answers and they just get by with like 1 mark, 2 mark. Normally for these questions, you see a lot of lines and it's normally worth like 5 marks, 6 marks, depending. So this paper is 2 hours. All right, that's enough time to finish every component. All right, so let's take a look at some advice when you're doing on answering your multiple choice. A lot of people learn off multiple choice answers because they see a lot of repeats. I don't want you to just be dependent on repeats because in those repeats, CXC do change up a word, they change up an option, and a lot of people fall for that trap because they just memorize like the previous years of papers and they feel it's the same. Only if your eye is really, really good, you're able to spot what difference they have in the format of the question, and they do change it. So you need to practice as many paper 1s as possible. How many people start using the past papers I sent? You could show by raising your hands. Two. Now that's something you have to be using even before me. Before you discover this class, you should have been practicing past papers throughout. All right? And it's always important to practice at least 10 years of past papers, and you start from the most recent, go down. The most recent paper, go back. All right. Also, you must read the instructions on the exam paper. Even though you know what to do, a lot of people may use pen. They may start writing their name in pen. They may start writing this center number, student number, and candidate number in pen, and they will discard that paper. Everything in your multiple choice question answer sheet have to be in pencil. I recommend using the regular bold tip pencils, not the push point, because you really need to shade your options clearly and dark. That is being marked by a computer. All right. Read all the questions carefully before you choose your answer. Do answer every single question, so 60 questions. Each question should take just over a minute. So it's 60 questions. You take an hour to answer 60. And then you have your 15 minutes to always check over. Now, if it is you have a question that you're stuck with, you could go on to the next and come back to that question, but make sure and come back. So you could probably put like a little asterisk next to the question, come back to it, and then ensure that you have everything completed. All right. Those are things you know. Now, give yourself time to check your work, but don't change any answer until you have thought carefully. Some people overthink. I've noticed a lot of people overthinking, and sometimes they may get it the first go, but because they start doubting themselves and start questioning what they have, they may want to change the answer. So you have to be very, very careful of that. What I do recommend, when you read the question, check it over one time. Don't wait till you reach the end of the paper, then you start from question one and you're checking over. Your mindset will have changed. When you focus on the question at that one time and you're able to read it a couple times and you're sure that you put down the correct answer, it's better you do it that way than you finish the whole paper and then you start back from number one. All right. If you're changing an answer, make sure you erase any errors completely, because any kind of dark spots that are left, even though you shade the correct answer, you will get it wrong. So if there's 2 stray marks on or stray shadings in the paper, it will not be correct. All right, you have to have 1 shading per question. All right, so only leave 1 answer space shaded deeply. Now, the process of elimination is one that this is a method to do your multiple choice. So basically, when you have 4 options, 2 of the options are going to be very off from the question. So you know you eliminate those 2. Now you must read the question at least twice, 3 times depending. You look at the options, read back the question, look back at the options, eliminate the 2 that is totally off, and then you will be left with 2 that kind of close, but you have to go back to you know what you remember, all the theory that you have learned, and put it into practice with the question till you are able to figure out the correct answer. Right? That's the process of elimination. That's how you do multiple choice. So here are some types of multiple choice questions. And I chose these because it can become confusing for someone who goes into the exam with a lot of anxiety and, you know, the nerves. Sometimes they could read something and just end up getting it wrong, but they know the answer. Like, for instance, the formation of urea occurs in so you have your options: pancreas, liver, kidney, bladder. So right off the head, if you are just reading this vaguely and your mind not really settled in the paper, because you hear the word urea, you might just automatically choose C, because you know urea, the kidney does filter urea. Urea is a component of urine, so you might just automatically go and shade C. But when you actually read the question over and over, they ask you where it is formed, the formation of it. So urea is not formed in the kidney, but urea is actually formed in the liver, because liver is what does detoxify the body, convert toxic components into something non-toxic, so the kidney will now get rid of it. So the answer here was supposed to be B. All right, and this is an example of a kind of question people, you know, can make an error very, very, very carelessly. So be careful of those. This is another one. So this one has to do with which part of the blood produces antibodies against certain bacteria. So your first instinct is to cross off the two, eliminate the two that is totally off. You know, red blood cell have nothing to do with getting rid of bacteria. That has to do with transporting oxygen. Likewise, plasma. Plasma is like the liquid part of the blood, so that has to do with transporting substances, dissolving the solutes in the blood. So you know you're left with C and D. You have learned that there are two types of white blood cells, phagocytes and lymphocytes. But you are now struggling with which one now does produce the antibodies. So you have to always remember your theory. The theory is a lot. The syllabus for HSB, there's a lot of information. So you go back and forth and you try to figure, okay, phagocytes, you know, the phagocytes are the ones that ingest bacteria. So therefore, the only one that is produce a chemical, which is known as antibodies, would be the lymphocyte. All right, so D would have been the correct answer here. This is something you have to be careful of now. Now, anytime you see a question and there are capital letters, like for instance, the word best, except, not, those are the ones you have to be, oh, they also have the word most likely, least likely. If they just put the word most in bold, least in bold, be very careful of those. Those are the tricky ones. So when they say which of the following is the best definition, that means it have answers that are correct, but you have to choose the best definition of the molar tooth. All right, because the molar is used to grind food. It is near the back of the mouth. It does have more than one root. And then the last one, it is never replaced. So all of them are correct, but you have to choose something that is the best definition. So you have to remember that there's a premolar and there's a molar. So A to C is correct for molar and also premolar. Premolar is the tooth right before the molar. They have the same kind of function. But the difference between premolar and molar, the molar, it is never replaced. All right, so that is the answer there. Remember, you have a milk set of teeth. The molar is something that is never replaced. Premolars is end up dropping and it is replaced when you get your permanent set of teeth. So this answer would have been D. All right, so be careful of those that you see with capital letters. I'm sure you come across already. All right. Now, any questions with the multiple choice? Any comments? Any problems at all? All right, let's move on to how to answer your structured questions. Your structured questions is a short answer. So section A of paper 2 is your structured questions, right? And these are only going for like 2, 3 marks, sometimes 1 mark. So basically, you just write in your answer. You don't have to go and repeat the sentence with the answer. If you are not sure of the right answer, use any help you are given by first reading carefully all parts of the question. Right? Some people just read the question once. And that is how they might just, whatever comes to their mind, they just put it down. Make sure you read it a couple times and look at how the question is stated. Try to figure out what exactly they're asking. So that's comprehension skills there. The next thing, as a rough guide, make 1 point or write 1 sentence for each mark available. So if you see something is 3 marks, you want to include at least 3 points or 3 sentences that include 3 points. All right, use it as a guide. Don't feel something is, if you see something is 3 marks and you just write 1 word, 1 point, don't feel that is in there. You need to have some more. Exam is all about gaining marks. That's about whatever you know and whatever comes to mind is what is about gaining as much marks as possible. So that's why I have to always read over questions. Yes?
Yep. Mike was kind of given a static background noise.
Still good. It's still here in static?
It stopped when I did ask the question.
Right. Yeah, it may have moments like that. So if you didn't hear what I said, you could always ask. I could go through it again.
Yeah, maybe I
Okay.
go through one more time.
Okay, so what I was saying, if something is worth 3 marks, you need to put down at least 3 points. You need to look at the marks as a guide to answer any question. Don't just write 1 point or 1 sentence or 1 word and feel you could get away with marks. The exam is about getting as much marks as possible. So check to see if you are clear where to put each part of your answer and do not repeat yourself. A lot of people is repeat the same point about 3 different ways, 3 different sentences and mean the same thing. Plenty people is do that. And they feel as though they're writing plenty, but they're saying the same thing repeatedly. All right, so be mindful of that, of all of those things. Here are some terms. All right, these are some terms the questions is coming. And this is what the terms actually mean. So this is what you have to really do. When you hear the word compare, like compare the plant cell and the animal cell, you have compare don't just mean the differences. Some people just put differences. Compare means you're comparing what's similar about them, and also what is different. So it's like a complete overview of the 2 things that you're trying to show. You're trying to compare. Define. Define means to state concisely the accurate meaning of a word or a phrase. So they could ask you define osmosis, right? Osmosis is a process, right? Or they could ask you define a phrase. Like for instance, define what is meant by the central nervous system. And you have to say what it made up of. So you have to, what you remember, you have to concisely give a definition or a meaning of that particular word. And don't repeat the word, like don't say osmosis. Like, okay, let me see what's an example, right? Digestion. Some people say digestion is when you digest your food. Don't go and repeat the word. You have to use something else to show the examiner you know what the word means. So instead of saying digestion is the process in which you digest your food, say that it is a process in which food is broken down into smaller pieces. All right, don't repeat back the word in the definition. Describe. Describe, discuss, and explain are the ones you have to write a lot. Right? When you have to describe something, no, it's not English. It's not like you're writing an essay, but you have to give detailed, factual information. So if they say describe how urine is formed, you're not just going to say, well, it is formed in the kidney. You have to give the parts of the kidney, the processes involved, a step-by-step breakdown of how it is formed. So a detailed factual information. You're painting everything of how it taking place in sentences that flow. All right. Discuss again. Discuss means to give a reasoned argument of the points for and against a certain case. So when you're discussing something, you're not just looking at it in one view. You have to look at it either for or against. So you have a broad, it's like a discussing. You have a broad, detailed answer of a particular, let's say, disease. They probably might ask you to discuss a disease, discuss like the effects of smoking. So you could talk about for and against, and not just negative things. You could talk about things that you think is for it as well. So don't look at it narrow-minded. All right, give a reason argument of the points for and against. Explain means to give reasons for something usually based on previous knowledge. So when you're explaining something, it's good to give an example. An example could be like everyday life. It could be an example that you learn from class. You know, like for instance, with you might have to explain, let's say, transpiration, or explain what is excretion. So you could just give the meaning of the word, and then you give an actual real example. So you say excretion is the removal of metabolic waste. This is and give a reason why you have to remove it. It is important because it can become toxic to the body. And an example of excretion is when carbon dioxide leaves the body. So that is a thorough explanation. When you're explaining something to someone, you're not just going and tell them, well, excretion is when you remove waste. You have to leave the person with, enough knowledge that they thoroughly understand what you're explaining. So you give the reasons, you define it, you give an example. All right, just think of those three things when you're explaining a process or whatever they ask you to explain. Now, these terms are interpret. These are the simple answers. When you have to interpret something, you just have to give the meaning and the importance, the significance of the term. All right, why is it important? When they tell you to name 3 effects of pollution, you just give the names. You don't have to go and explain. Like, for instance, 3 effects of pollution. You could say it could affect the health of humans, but you don't have to go and say, well, air pollution has caused respiratory disease, and you just give the effects, give the name only. Outline means to give a brief information on the most important steps or points, often numbered. So when they say outline, like outline how insulin is made, right? That's something I see a lot. Outline the steps in which insulin is made. You put number 1, you put the steps in an orderly fashion. And you explain in each step as you go along. Very briefly, however. State means to give factual information in a brief way. No details or explanations. So if they say state the difference between a plant and animal cell, you just state the difference. The animal cell have a cell wall, the plant cell have a cell wall, the animal cell don't have a cell wall. Very brief. And you don't have to go and say why animal cell do have one and plant cell have a, right? State is to give factual information in a brief way. Lastly, suggest. Suggest is to offer a reasonable explanation for an observation based on previous knowledge or use information provided. So suggest and discuss kind of similar. So what you're doing when it says suggest, when you have to suggest something, you are giving them a reasonable explanation for the observation. I'll point out some questions with suggest. All right, but you have to make sure you're backing up your answer with previous knowledge. So you're using theory, you're giving an explanation based on what they ask you to suggest. So whenever you're doing a paper 2, look out for these words and try to write according to what these words mean. All right, a lot of people just feel like when they see define, describe, they just give vague answers. So just be mindful of that. All right, the essay type. Now, the essay type is simply the extended response questions. And that is section B of your paper 2. So you will have some writing to do. The first thing is to interpret the question. Read the question a couple times and underline the keywords. Like if it have discussed in it, explain. Sometimes it just have two questions in one. You look out for what exactly they want. Understand what the terms mean. Plan your answer. Plenty people they just start to write. I don't know why. They just start to write. And when they do that, they actually put themselves in a little jam. They would have write so much things in one sentence that they can't even come back and put like, in the most like important things. You always have a plan how to lay out your answer. So you always start with like a little definition. You introduce what, okay, like if they say discuss something, describe something, you then do that in an orderly fashion. And some people in the side of the paper, or they ask the exam scrap paper, they just make notes. So before they start to write their answers out, they just have like a concept map. They will do a little brainstorming, and whatever comes to that topic, they start to write it out in a little scrap concept map, so that they have all the points already written, so that while writing now, they're not going to forget something. So they could always look back at the scrap page and see, okay, I still have to talk about this and this. So they have an idea what exactly they need to write about. When you just start to automatically write, you might forget something. And that could cost you a good 3 marks, 2 marks, depending on the question. All right, so before you start to write, try to do all of these steps before you start to write out your answer. And you'll see how much organized and how much planned out your answers will be. So I would like you to practice that today. All right. The next thing, don't try to write more than can easily fit in the space. Some people is be writing and they're repeating themselves so many times that they even running out of space, and they're writing below, they're writing on all over the page. Try to make what you have to say fit in the required amount of lines they gave you. All right, and even if you write big, they just give you extra lines too, just in case. The next thing, if you don't have much to write, it have some people, they didn't know what to write at all. They can't really think of what to write. Always go back and read over the question. Check back the question. Sometimes you could flip through the exam too. You might, in a previous question, you might get some information on a topic. I've seen that happen already. You could get little clues, and you might get a little more information to write about that particular question that you initially didn't have enough information for. You have just over a minute to answer for each mark, so you need to think and work quickly. At the same time, don't feel like time is just running out. You don't want to just be sitting on with one question, but at the same time, you want to make sure you answer everything on the paper. There are some people who just start from the back, because when you sit for your paper too, as soon as the exam now, like time now call, you have that energy, you have that burst of ideas and knowledge in your mind. You might want to go to the back, the section B part first, and then go to the section A. Some people do it like that. All right, that all depends on you. Because sometimes when you pass through question 1, 2, 3, you start to get tired. You start to get, sitting for hour alone. You start to get a little restless and all these things. So that's up to you. You have to answer all questions, of course. If you miss out any, then cut down on the score you can attain. So what that basically means, now I mark biology papers, and it's the same throughout all the C-Sec subjects. Whenever we notice, like for instance, a student who may have run out of time, they tend to put the answer in like bullet points. They wouldn't write full sentences, but they tend to just put the points and we still mark it. All right, so don't feel as though if time run out and you realize you have a extended response question left to do, don't just leave it out. Read the question and put the points that you would have included in that answer. It will be marked. Right, so now that was just a little like pointers, some tips. I hope that you do put it into practice. All right, now we are going to move on to the broad topics for your paper 2. So I did send you it in the group. We are going to look at these now. Please don't feel as though this is the paper. You notice there's 7 topics. It might not be in this particular order. You might have like 2 topics in one question. You know, you can't really tell the paper from just seeing the topics. So don't learn it off just like how you see it here. Also, these are broad topics, so there are subtopics under each here. Like for instance, the reproductive system. You have you never know, they bring menstrual cycle or contraceptive methods. They are subtopics. So you want to really iron out the entire topic as much as possible, but pay close attention to these. Now, the first one is very simple. A lot of people start off learning cells, the types of cells in the body, structure and function. Sexually transmitted diseases are easy to talk about, like the signs and symptoms, treatment and control. Photosynthesis and carbon cycle. This might be the challenging one for some people, the cycle especially. The reproductive system, so that's a body system. So you get a little about plants, disease, then you get the body system. Now it's heavily on disease if you notice. So you have the STDs to learn. Then you have disease and the impact on humans. So this is a broad topic here. There are many diseases. There's the pathogenic disease, hereditary disease. You don't know which one they could bring. You have the mosquito-borne illnesses. So you don't know. So this is something you really have to sit down and go through. And we will look at all the disease and how they impact humans. Pollution as well as a broad one. Pollution and its effects on the environment and the community, because you have various kinds of pollution to look at. And then the last body system is the nervous system. So you don't know, diagrams come in. It could be the brain, it could be the male or female reproductive system. Some body system diagram will come. And you'll have to label it, of course. Or it could even be a diagram of a plant and animal cell. So make sure we have to go through diagrams as well. Okay, so let's start with the first. Now, the paper 3, this is the clue that they gave. They're giving you something on nutrition. Nutrition could be photosynthesis. It could be digestion. So it could be like autotrophic and heterotrophic nutrition. And then you have to plot a graph. All right, so make sure you work with your ruler, your pencil for your paper 3. Those are, well, paper 3, let me just repeat, this is only for people who are private candidates. Okay, so let's look at the first topic. Cell structure and function. Now, a cell, if you recall, a cell is a basic unit of life. So anything that is living, this is the smallest unit of a living structure. So there are various types of cells you need to learn in the human body, like the red blood cell, the nerve cell, muscle cell, the reproductive cells like the sperm cell, the egg cell. But you need to know the difference between the plant and the animal cell. So here we have them side by side. There's a lot of similarities and differences. So they really like to ask you to compare these two. When you look at like for instance, the plant cell, it tends to have a more rectangular look. Now, diagrams tend to not look colored and nice like what you see in the slides or in textbooks. They tend to make it look very difficult to kind of tell, but the features will always be the same, which is the plants will have the cell wall. It have a large permanent vacuole. You have now, they have this green structure, which is the chloroplast, which contains chlorophyll. Those are the three things that are different from the animal. Animals don't have those. They have a cell membrane. They have small, numerous vacuole, not this large one. And if you notice, there's no chloroplast. All right, so they both have nucleus, they both have cytoplasm, they both have food storage units. In the plant, they call it starch grain, and in the animal, they call it glycogen granule. This kind of funny shape here, this is the mitochondria. Now, the mitochondria, when you look at it carefully, some people just mix it up with the chloroplast. Chloroplasts tend to be more circular, and the mitochondria tend to be a little oval shape, and they tend to have like squiggly lines in the inside. So just be careful with those two. The nucleus, you cannot miss the nucleus because it tends to just be one circular or irregular shape inside of the cell. All right, and that's the main parts of the cell, and these are the functions. So you must know what each thing is responsible for. The mitochondria is the site of respiration, important organelle. Now you call these things structures or you call it organelles. Organelles are small membrane-bound features inside of the cell, and they all have a different role or function. The nucleus is the most important one because that is the one that controls everything that's going on in the cell, and hence the reason why it contains all your genes. So they often say that the nucleus controls activities of the cell, contains chromosomes. I noticed they're not bringing genetics, and that was a sigh of relief, I know, for many students. When you go back to the topics, I'm not saying genetics. All right, so some people were glad about that. But don't forget it will come in your paper one, so you still have to learn it. Right, so these are the organelles to learn and the functions. All right. Now here's a question for you to practice. So you're going to write out your answers and we'll go through it. I'll give you about 5 minutes. Is that clear?
Yes, miss.
All right, so whatever you remember, you write out your answers and I'll call on individuals to answer. All right, so this shouldn't take it too long. What I actually will do, I'll go through the answer with you, so you could correct as you go along, because if we were to really sit down and ask you to unmute yourself, it will take some time, and you would realize the crash course time, it is fly. So I will actually go through it. When we start doing the paper one, then I'll ask you to participate. All right, so just correct as you go, and you can ask some questions as well. Part A. Name each of the four structures labeled as A, B, C, and D. Now, like I said, the diagrams you have to pay close attention to. Look at what the line is touching. So A is touching this kind of membrane bound. This is what you call a sac, like a membrane bound sac. And this is what you call, now you will not have seen it in this previous diagram. Right, this is a basic outline. This is actually what you call the endoplasmic reticulum. And you could even mention it's the rough endoplasmic reticulum, simply because it have these little dots. When you see these little dots, that is ribosomes. So when ribosome is present in that sac structure, you call it the rough ER or rough endoplasmic reticulum. All right, make sure you have it spelled properly as well. They do look at spelling. B now. Now remember B, when you look at the shape, you see that kind of squiggly kind of appearance on the inside. That would have been the mitochondria. All right, C is actually pointing the nucleus, and D is pointing the cell membrane. And they will always tell you, well, what type of cell it is as well. So once you see animal cell, you don't have to put anything that's not in the animal cell, right? They're telling you which cell, so that is like a little clue there. Part B, name one type of cell which does not possess a nucleus. Now your body actually has red blood cells, and red blood cells do not have a nucleus, because red blood cell is a type of cell that is often replaced, like every month, not every month, 120 days, basically. Every 120 days, you're going to have new red blood cells. So this one does not have a nucleus. All right. C, part 1. Name the compound which is found in the outer layer of plant cells, but not in the animal cell. So everybody should have cell wall, right? Or could say cellulose, because it's a compound. So you could put cellulose, which is the material that builds the cell wall. Okay, so those two are regarded correct. What is the function? State the function. Now look at the word state. State the function of the compound. So the function of the cell wall is to give the plant its shape, protect the plant, support the plant. Those three are correct. It don't have to be written exactly like I said it, but once you have those points. All right, anybody have any questions?
Miss, for C and E, you can put nuclear envelope.
Nuclear envelope will work because yes, the nucleus have a membrane, right? You could put nuclear membrane, nuclear envelope, nucleus. All right, next topic. Let's move on to the sexually transmitted disease. I'll go through this and then we'll take a break. Now, the sexually transmitted disease, you remember you have two categories. You have the STIs, the sexually transmitted infections. Those are usually like this one, gonorrhea and syphilis. Because it is caused by a bacterium, it starts off as an infection first. And because there are antibiotics to treat it, it's regarded like you could stop it before it becomes a disease. All right, now if you're not able to detect it early o'clock, and the infection spread, then it becomes a disease in the body. So you have AIDS. AIDS is called, well, AIDS stands for Acquired Immune Deficiency Syndrome. It often asks you to write out what it stands for. Same thing for HIV virus. HIV stands for Human Immunodeficiency Virus. So AIDS is caused by the HIV virus. Now the body will start off, you first start off with the HIV infection. That HIV virus tends to attack your white blood cells, your lymphocytes. So in doing so, it weakens your immune system. When your immune system is weakened, you acquire immune deficiency syndrome. You acquire, your immune system become deficient. So now that the person has developed AIDS, they cannot be in any kind of environment that has pathogens, because the minute a pathogen enter their body, they cannot defend it. They can't defend it because their white blood cells were destroyed. So they actually die from other illnesses as a result. Not from the HIV virus, but other illnesses. All right, so there are several symptoms. There are persistent cough, fever, skin rash. Always learn symptoms. They're always asking about that. Signs as well. Signs is what you see. So even though you're seeing swollen lymph gland under symptom, that's something you could see. You could actually see a swollen lymph gland. You could see like rashes. So once you could see something, that's a sign. If you're feeling something internally, well, that's a symptom. So that would be like weakness and fever. All right, now you have secondary symptoms. So you have like the other infections the body could have. That is when your immune system has been destroyed. You're now able to, your body cannot fight off like pneumonia, tuberculosis if it enters the body, fungal disease, cancer. The body is actually susceptible to getting other kinds of diseases now. So that's like the secondary. How to control? So the sexually transmitted disease, the control will be pretty much similar to each disease. You basically have to practice monogamy. Monogamy is when you have one partner. So you limit the amount of partners, you make sure you screen them, safely screen them, do STD tests every the advice is every 6 months, because it takes a while for that virus to multiply and show up in our blood test. So they advise you to do a test every 6 months. Do not inject drugs, so don't share needles, especially people who get tattoos and these things. You have to be careful. Make sure they're taking a brand new needle, a sterile needle. Use barrier methods like the condom. Now, this is the only contraceptive method that could prevent an STD. Because it's a barrier, it's latex, it can't prevent the virus from entering the person during sexual activity. Education is also a control measure. Once someone becomes educated about a disease and see how the signs and symptoms are, see how it is spread, they are privy now to what to expect and what to look out for. So they will know how to protect themselves. They are looking into a vaccine. I've been hearing this years upon years. I think they have a lot of drugs for it. They have what you call antiretroviral drugs. All right, those are things that kind of suppress the virus from multiplying. But to actually get a vaccine to prevent it, that has never been developed. But they say they're trying to develop it. Gonorrhea. Gonorrhea is caused by bacteria. Right? Now, bacteria and virus is two different pathogens. They behave differently. It's actually easier to get rid of a bacteria. Virus is harder to get rid of because they mutate a lot. They could change. And when they mutate for the better. This mutate strong, and they're able to withstand harsh conditions inside of the body. Bacteria, now you can treat it with antibiotics. So there are treatment for this particular disease. No known vaccine. Well, it will have the same control where you practice monogamy. The symptoms are different. So you have yellowish discharge from the urethra. So when you're urinating, you get a yellow kind of pus. However, often not noticed in females. If left untreated, it could cause inflammation. Inflammation is swelling. So the fallopian tube itself could become swollen. Sperm ducts could lead to sterility. Sterility means that unable to produce any kind of sperm cell or any female. Sterility means that the female is unable to produce egg cells. So both of them cannot get pregnant. You also suffer from other kinds of diseases, arthritis, weakened heart, blindness. All right, so make sure you learn those. All right, this table is telling you how HIV is transmitted and the various ways to control the spread of HIV. Right, so you have a true unprotected sexual intercourse with the infected person. That's the most common method of transmission, by the way. How to prevent this? Abstain from sexual. So abstinence is a method of control too. Also, use a condom. The sharing of the needles, blades, or other cutting instruments. So even people who, let's say, going to the barber or going to the hairdresser, all of that you have to be careful. They make sure they have sterile. Now, sterile instruments mean that they would have used like alcohol. Some people is heat it, some people is wash it thoroughly, but you need to use a little more techniques to make sure all kinds of pathogens have been fully destroyed. All right, drug users tend to share out of needles, so they pass on the virus easily. Infected mothers now pregnant women can pass the virus to the fetus through the placenta and by breastfeeding. So in order to control that, the pregnant woman can take drugs which could reduce the risk of infection in the fetus. So if she take the antiretroviral drugs, she could kind of reduce the amount of HIV virus in her blood, which could prevent it from passing over to the fetus. And I've heard of that actually working. And when they're feeding babies, both mothers, you have to use formula or milk from an uninfected mother. You can't breastfeed. All right. Blood transfusions is also a way in which HIV is transmitted. So people who need like blood from someone, sometimes I actually heard of a case in Trinidad. A child got HIV from an infected blood transfusion. Before you donate blood, you have to go through a series of blood tests and to make sure there's no kind of virus or pathogen and all these things. So transfusion of unsterilized and infected blood can pass on the virus. Although the numbers infected in this way are low, but it is possible. Careful screening of blood used for transfusion. So you have to run the tests to make sure it's safe. In hospitals, the virus can spread if surgical instruments are not sterilized and through needle stick accidents. So you need to properly sterilize the instruments. Like I said, they have like now they're not supposed to reuse needles, but I do know like surgical knives, those things are costly. So it's not like they're going to throw away after they use a knife. They will sterilize it. So the person in charge of sterilizing have to make sure they do it properly. So they have to, sometimes they use something called an autoclave. That is a machine that will have like a particular liquid. They could put probably like soap water in it. They could put alcohol and it spins rapidly. So they autoclave it. Sometimes they heat it. The heat will kill the pathogens. And they rinse it off and they let it air dry. Now, when they're letting it air, actually, they don't have it out in the open air drying. They may put it in like a little enclosed oven and let it dry for a bit. So once it is properly sterilized, then, well, it should be safe to use. All right. And then to get rid of medical waste, this shouldn't be thrown into like an ordinary bin. They need to have like a biohazard bag that cannot allow blood to seep out or flies to get in. And they need to, there's a designated company to get rid of medical waste. All right, so it's not thrown in landfill sites and it's not thrown in garbage bins outside. So this table now showing a little more about gonorrhea. All right, so we have the symptom. The men and the women have different, there's a little difference in the signs and symptoms. So we could go through those. Syphilis is also something, and herpes. Syphilis is also caused by a bacteria. Herpes is caused by a virus. All right, so those are two you should also go through, and you will see it later on. So I want you to practice this question, write out your answers, and then I'll go through it. Can everyone see the questions on the screen?
Yes, ma'am.
Right, now you're going to see something with 9 marks. I would just advise you put the points and bullet points for now. You could always expand and develop your answer later on. All right, we really have to work with time today. Okay. So by now you should have an idea what answers are required. So I'm going to go through it very quickly. Okay, the first one. What is acquired immune deficiency syndrome or AIDS? So for something that is worth 1 mark, you're just going to say that is when your immune system is basically destroyed by the HIV virus. Part 2, name the virus that causes AIDS. So you can put HIV, or you can even write it out, human immunodeficiency virus. 3, list 3 ways in which the AIDS virus may be spread. So there are various ways in the table. So you can say sexual intercourse with an infected person, and make sure I'm putting with unprotected sex so that it's understood no condom was used. Also sharing of needles, blood transfusions. And when I say list, you can write it like that. Part B, as a health educator, you are addressing a church youth group. Part 1, describe how the virus which causes AIDS enter the body. So you're going to say the virus, basic, no, this is described, so you have to be a little thorough for 3 marks. You're going to basically say the virus can be transmitted through the body by the transmission of bodily fluids or blood. All right, and so bodily fluids would be like semen, blood, what blood transfusion, once there's any kind of opening in the skin, opening in the actual passageway there, or tears or anything like that, the virus can pass through. Now, bodily fluid is not sweat and is not saliva. The virus will die in those bodily fluids, but semen it can live in as well as blood. So make sure and specify those 2. Part 2, explain how full-blown AIDS develops from the time the virus enters the blood. Now, this is 9 marks, so you have to basically say the virus, when the virus enters the body, it targets the lymphocytes and it attaches itself to the lymphocyte and destroys it. In so doing, it spreads throughout the body, and since the immune system has now been destroyed, it causes acquired immune deficiency syndrome, whereby if there is a particular pathogen that is present in the body, it can easily multiply since there's no lymphocytes to get rid of it. All right, so those are basically the points you should have. Part C, give 3 reasons why Caribbean people must be concerned about the AIDS epidemic. So epidemic is when it's in a particular country. All right, then spread throughout the world. When it spread throughout the entire world, then it's called a pandemic. All right, so 3 reasons. Now epidemic, so this will be like the Caribbean islands. If it's endemic is when it's within one particular island or one country. So basically they should be concerned because it is deadly. AIDS is deadly. The lifespan of the individual is not long if they develop AIDS. Secondly, if you have a lot of people dying from the disease, then productivity declines. So you have less people now who can do something, do a particular task, do a particular job. So that productivity declines. And then also, you have to be concerned because if you have a lot of deaths or a lot of people getting sick, there's more expense when it comes to the medical bills. So you have to pay for more drugs, you have to pay for maybe vaccines or particular health care. So a lot of money will be spent on the medical sector. All right, so those are reasons why you must be concerned. You could think of other social reasons as well. You could talk about suicide. There are a lot of things. Depression, you could mention as well. So this is like a broad kind of question here. There's many things you could talk about. Part 4. So below we have gonorrhea and syphilis are two sexually transmitted diseases. Identify two signs or symptoms of gonorrhea, two signs and symptoms of syphilis. So the table is there. Basically, for gonorrhea, you can say the discharge. You could talk about it becomes painful to pass urine. Syphilis will have almost the same. I need to include a table for syphilis and herpes. I will update this line and include it. But basically, you will have you're going to have a lot of pain. You may have discharge. You may have it could lead to organ failure in the body. All right, so those are some to consider. And last one, suggest one method of treatment for gonorrhea and one for syphilis. Now, because both of them is caused by bacteria, you can mention these drugs. So if you notice for gonorrhea, they said antibiotics. So you could actually specify like, okay, penicillin, streptomycin. If you remember, if you don't remember, you could just put antibiotics. All right, and every time you're talking about getting rid of a bacteria, you could also say, well, you could also mention a method of treatment would be taking a lot of vitamins or supplements to boost back the body's immune system. So you could fight the bacteria as well. All right, so that is a question based on sexually transmitted disease. It may not be the same disease, it could talk about something else, but they really like to bring AIDS, they really like to bring HIV. Those are like the two common ones they like to talk about. All right, so any questions here?
No, miss.
All right then. So let us pause for our first break. Now is about what, 9:30 so? All right, so we'll take 15 minutes and we will return. All right, so when we return, we will move on to the next topic. Make sure and take your eyes off the screen. I will see you next 15 minutes. All right, so you should be returning soon from your break. Once you return and you're back behind the screen, you can go ahead and click the raise hand feature. So I know that you're back. And I do hope you take your time away from the screen and then go. You must take a little walk, get a cup of tea, stretch your legs a bit. All right, because it can become tiring when you're just looking at a screen. Right, so we have a few people here. The next topic we're going to look at is the photosynthesis part. They predicted a lunar eclipse tonight. So if it is your weekend and about 10, not 10, they say the partial eclipse will start from 10:27, and when it's about 12 or 1 o'clock in the morning, you should be able to see the total eclipse. Okay, so let's take a look at photosynthesis. All right, so we're going from now till lunch, right? Okay, so photosynthesis is a process in which green plants make food using sunlight. Now, there are simple things you need to consider. You need to include the word green plant. Reason being, they have the pigment called chlorophyll. So once the leaves are green, they are participating in photosynthesis. So the food that they are making is in the form of glucose. And light energy, which is basically from sunlight, is used to make the food. So you're going to have two stages. You're going to have what you call the light dependent stage and the light independent stage. The light dependent stage needs sunlight. You're depending on sunlight. So it is depending on sunlight to split water into hydrogen and oxygen. So where you're seeing hydrogen, you're seeing it going towards glucose. Hydrogen is an atom that is found in the glucose molecule. When you look at the chemical formula, you'll notice it's C6H12O6. So you need 12 hydrogen atoms in order to make that glucose. Oxygen, now you notice oxygen going in a different direction. Oxygen is a byproduct of photosynthesis. So that will actually leave the leaf. It diffuses out of the leaf through the stomata. Now, carbon dioxide is the gas that enters the leaf. So they take in carbon dioxide and they combine that carbon dioxide with the water, with the hydrogen from the water into glucose. So that stage, that food making stage, is the light independent stage. Light is not required for that part. All light is required to do is split water into hydrogen and oxygen. So the two equations you must learn, the word and the chemical equation. When you're writing the equation, do include the conditions on the arrow. So if you notice, they have light on top and chlorophyll below. Those are conditions necessary for photosynthesis. And you will notice the chemical formula, it is in a balanced form. Balance meaning they're showing every single how many molecules of each that is required. So there's a 6 that will go in front of the CO2, a 6 that will go in front of the H2O, and a 6 that will go in front of the oxygen. That is a balanced chemical formula. So it's 6 carbon dioxide molecules will react with 6 water molecules to make one molecule of glucose and 6 molecules of oxygen. All right, so make sure I learn those two. Okay, so sometimes when they're talking about photosynthesis, they tend to tie in, you might see questions based on food chains, just simply because it's dealing with food. These are some terms you must look out for. Now, herbivores. Herbivores are animals that feed off plants. Now, plants are given the name producers. Because they make their own food, they are what you call producers. Carnivores are animals that feed off other animals or meat eaters. Omnivores are plant and meat eaters. Now, when they say construct a food chain with 4 trophic level, you must count from the plants. So the plant being the producer is a trophic level. All right, so you start off with your plant. All food chains must start with a plant because they are the ones who take in sunlight and using it to make food. They start off a food chain, right? Anything to do with pyramids. Now, I noticed pyramids, they say not coming. That wasn't one of the topics. So I will basically just like a little overview. A pyramid is a diagram to show the feeding relationship in the food chain. The pyramid also, at the bottom of the pyramid, it begins with your producer or your plant. All right, so that's some side notes there. Now the carbon cycle, people just watch this and they just get confused with all the arrows. Don't let the arrows confuse you. You need to learn the processes. The processes would be these terms: photosynthesis, respiration, combustion, fossilization, death and decay. Those now sometimes it is called death and decay. They just sum it up as decomposition as well. All right, so those are the process names, and you need to know where taking place in the cycle. Now, carbon is a very abundant element that exists in nature, and it exists in different forms. It could exist as a gas, it could exist as a compound. So we have to learn how it's circulating in the environment, how it's cycling. So you always start off with the gas form. So as you can see, carbon dioxide or CO2, you have about 0.03 to 0.04% of it in the air. Plants are the only organism that take in the gas and are able to convert it into an organic compound. That organic compound is what you just learned. That is glucose. Right? Because if you notice, glucose have how much carbon? 6. It's C6, so it has 6 carbon in it. So here you're seeing carbon, which is in a gas form, turn into a food form, which is an organic compound. So that is due to photosynthesis. Now that same glucose that is present in plants, plants also use it. When plants use it, they need to use their own food too to survive. So when they're breaking down their food in their body, they are going to release carbon dioxide back into the air. So although they're taking carbon dioxide for photosynthesis, they release it back as a gas through respiration. So plants respire and animals. Animals will also give off carbon dioxide in the air. Because remember, when animals feed on plants, they're getting the glucose, so they have that glucose in their body to break down and return it as a gas. So you see how it is cycle right here. You have a little cycle that form. The next thing, now plants and animals, they don't last, they will eventually die. When they actually die, that is due to the process of decomposition. So when their bodies are breaking down or rotting or decaying, the carbon is not just going to be gone. The carbon in their body is going to be taken up by the decomposers. So decomposers are bacteria and fungi. they will take that same carbon from their body, and when they consume that dead plant, dead animal, they will also break down that glucose, that carbon compound, and they will also return it as a gas. So it's three things respiring here: plants, animals, and bacteria and fungi. They will all return carbon dioxide back into the air. All right. Now, over time, over millions of years, these same dead plants and animals just turn into fossil fuels. But that takes years, millions of years. When it actually turns into a fossil fuel, well, they call the process fossilization. So due to heat and pressure in the Earth's crust, it turns into like a oil, it turns into petroleum, or it turns into coals. Those are fossil fuels, and those fossil fuels contain carbon. So when people take fossil fuels from the earth and they carry it to the factories, the oil and gas companies, they are going to basically try to get the energy from it by burning it. So they put it into like those large chambers, a lot of chemical reactions to get the energy from it. And when they are doing so, it's going to emit gas. So when they burn it by combustion, it's going to emit carbon dioxide back into the air. And that is how carbon is cycled. So the process names are important. Explaining what goes on in each stage is also important. So they could ask you to label a cycle, they could ask you to explain the cycle, they could even ask you to draw the cycle. So make sure you go through the processes. This is this is part of the cycle. So you are just going to read it and you're just going to put the appropriate process names in 1 and 2. So give it a read and try it out, and then I'll correct it. All right, so who found out the two processes? What is 1 and what is 2? Anybody? So when you're seeing carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, You're seeing the arrow pointing down, and then you're seeing plants. What will fit in here? Christy. This one is photosynthesis, right? Photosynthesis is being done by plants, and they're taking carbon dioxide. So then it's seeing, well, animals feed on plants, and then animals, something come in here that will give off carbon dioxide in the air or in the atmosphere. Brent, which process will come here?
Respiration.
Very good, respiration. All right, so look at how sometimes they could bring piece of the cycle too. So it's all about looking at what comes before the arrow and after the arrow to understand what process to fit in. All right, next topic, reproductive system. So this is our entire system, and they could bring all kind of things. So we have to take it piece by piece, right? I just did a little flow chart. It might be tiny depending on what screen you're looking at, but when you get the actual PowerPoint, you could go through each point. So we'll basically look at the, let's start off first with the two types of systems. So you have the male system. The parts of the male system, you must know how to label the testes, the epididymis, vas deferens, prostate gland, seminal vesicle, urethra. Now, the part that is produced, the sex cell or the sperm cell, will be the testes. The testes is produce sperm cell and the male hormone called testosterone. So you have to remember testes contain those. The epididymis is also the coiled tube that is store the mature sperm cells. The vas deferens is known as the sperm duct. I have a little typo here. It's not supposed to have a T. So it's supposed to be NS. Vas deferens or sperm duct. That is transport the sperm cells away from the epididymis. So during sexual intercourse, the sperm cell will travel through those two tubes. Prostate gland, seminal vesicle, they have two common things. They basically secrete a fluid. The fluid is just going to have a consistency where sperm cells can live in, as well as nutrients for the sperm cell to live. The sperm cells can live in the body for about up to 3 days. And also you need to have the optimum pH environment for them to survive, which is an alkaline kind of environment. All right, and then, well, urethra. So the male system is not too long. There's a lot of tubes, so you don't want to confuse the tubes. Epididymis is a coiled up tube. Vas deferens is a long tube, and that will lead into the urethra. So the urethra is a tube now that will carry the semen out of the penis during ejaculation. All right, now females. Females have the ovary, 2 ovaries, and the ovary is in charge of, now the ovary contains the sex hormones, which is progesterone and estrogen. Those are 2 important hormones, especially for not only developing the sexual characteristics in a woman, like the enlargement of breasts and widening of the hips. Those 2 are important for the menstrual cycle too. So you notice our menstrual cycle here. Now it's 4 hormones that control the menstrual cycle, which would be estrogen, progesterone, follicle stimulating hormone, as well as luteinizing hormone. So I have each hormone and what it is responsible for. All right, now oviduct is also known as fallopian tube. Uterus is also known as the womb. Endometrium is also known as the uterus lining. Cervix. Well, cervix is a ring of muscles. and then the vagina. Now, the different hormones have different functions. So in the menstrual cycle, which lasts 28 days, that is when you're going to have the body is preparing itself for pregnancy, right? The menstrual cycle is basically preparing the womb. If by chance an egg is fertilized, the womb is prepared. The lining is built to support a developing fetus. So you have the follicle stimulating hormone, which is FSH. That is responsible for developing a primary egg into a mature egg. Luteinizing hormone is released that mature egg into the oviduct. The oviduct is the area where cells will meet the egg and fertilize it. Then you have the estrogen. Estrogen is repair or build the uterus lining or the endometrium so that the placenta can eventually develop if pregnancy was to take place. And then progesterone does maintain that lining, makes it thick, enriched with blood cells, and that also supports the developing fetus. All right, so two things again, you have to know what's the female sex cell, that is the ovum or the ova in plural, or you can just simply say egg cell. Now in the female, one egg is produced or one egg is matured each month. In the male have millions of sperm cells, and it matures when puberty. It matures, it develops during puberty. So from the time the male reaches around age 12, 13, those sperm cells can become matured, and those sperm cells can be stored and available every day. Whereas for females, one mature egg is available per month until menopause, right? So until she reaches around 49, 50 years, then no egg is being matured or released. So that's a little about the reproductive system. The whole point with reproduction, you have to make sure you understand there's sexual reproduction, which involves the two sex cells fusing together. The two sex cells, when it fuse together, you call it fertilization. So after fertilization is lead to implantation. That is when the embryo, now a zygote forms when it fuses. There's a ball of cells. Then you have the embryo, which is going to attach to the uterus lining. So that is why these two, estrogen and progesterone hormones, that is the reason for building back the lining so that it could implant itself. When it implants itself, it will then turn into the fetus. So you have the 9-month pregnancy or gestation time where that baby will grow, develop, and then afterwards you will have childbirth. Now, the other thing with reproductive system, you have to know, well, of course, the contraceptive methods too. This is something like a subtopic under the reproductive system. So birth control or contraception is a way to prevent fertilization or prevent pregnancy. So you have several different kinds of methods. The example of each method, the actual procedure, like how the method is done, and if it's reliable. So you have little notes here you could go through. I know it's a little small if you're looking at it in a small screen, but when you get it, you could zoom in and look at it carefully. So I'll call out the main methods. Natural methods include abstinence, withdrawal method, rhythm method. All right, the most 100% effective one will be abstinence, of course. Chemical methods will include like something you have to purchase in a pharmacy. So that will be like your contraceptive pills or birth control pill. you have the injection, you have the skin implants, and then you have spermicides. All right. Not all of them are effective. Some of them are used, you can have multiple methods of using together. Like the female could use the contraceptive pill, the male could use the spermicide. The mechanical methods will be like a barrier methods. So that will shield the semen from entering the vagina. That will include like condom. You have male and female condom, by the way. You have the cervical cap or the diaphragm, and then you have a device known as the IUD. The IUD or the intrauterine device is basically to prevent the fetus or prevent the embryo from implanting itself on the wall of the uterus. All right, so it's like a little T shape and it must be inserted by a doctor. The most effective one, other than abstinence, will be the surgical methods. These are irreversible. So once you decide you don't want any children, this will be permanent. So you call it sterilization. When someone is sterile, they cannot get or cannot get someone pregnant and they cannot become pregnant. So that will involve cutting and tying of either the sperm duct in the male, which is the vas deferens, you cut and tie it, so no sperm cell can be released. In the female, you're cutting and tying the oviduct or the fallopian tube, so no egg can be released, or no sperm cell could ever reach that egg. So you basically destroy the pathway for fertilization. So those are 100% effective. All of them will have a disadvantage and advantages. So if they ever ask you like advantage, you can always go through the table just to go through back the methods. Right? Anybody have any questions with reproductive system here? All right. So far so good. Topics are not difficult. All right. Now look at this question. It involves contraceptive method, menstrual cycle, a little about the placenta. All right, so go ahead and go through the answers on your own, and then I will correct it. So you can correct yourself. Okay. I noticed the disease slide was up. Were you able to see the questions and get some answers?
Yes, miss.
Okay, because it's very simple, we'll go through it now. All right. Number 7, part A. Choose the word from the bracket at the end of the statement to complete the statement correctly. So they're giving you some words to fill in the blanks. The radar method is an example of a or an. This will be natural method of birth control, while contraceptive pills are an example of a artificial method. Right? Birth control pills are man-made. Part B, what is meant by safe period in reproduction? So when you hear the word safe period, it means that is the gap or the window in the menstrual cycle that is safe to have unprotected sex. Meaning that is the safe window period where there is no fertile or no egg being released in the fallopian tube. All right, which days of the menstrual cycle are considered not safe? That is going to be 2 days. Now you can have like a time frame. So which is not considered safe, you will have to put like from day, let's say day 13 or day, you can even say up to day 12, day 13 to day 16. Because day 14 is when the egg is, day 14 is said to be ovulation time, which is when the mature egg has left the ovary and is awaiting a sperm cell in the fallopian tube. So within that time frame, the female is very fertile. So that is considered the not safe time in the menstrual cycle. So from day 13 to day 16. Right? Because they said days. If they said which day, you could just put day 14. Part D. Explain 2 ways in which contraceptive pills prevent pregnancy. So 2 ways. Now we can talk about 2 hormones that it affects. These contraceptive pills just change or lower the amount of hormones. So you could say, okay, the contraceptive pill can decrease the estrogen level, which will cause the uterus lining to not be repaired. So if it's not repaired, that means there's no way any kind of embryo can even attach to the lining because there's no wall for it to attach onto. Secondly, it can lower the luteinizing hormone. So if it lowers the luteinizing hormone, that means ovulation cannot occur. And if ovulation cannot occur, then there's no egg. No egg can be released and no fertilization can take place. So it's pinpointing the hormones and just saying what will be the effect if it is lowered. Right? Many pills behave differently. Many of them will affect a different hormone. So that is why they always advise to seek a doctor or medical advice when purchasing contraceptive pills. Some may work for others. Everyone's body is different. So what may work for you might not work for someone else. Part E. In pregnancy, explain how the structure of the placenta is related to its function. So when you look at the structure of the placenta, it's basically thick. It's a thick lining of blood vessels. So that would have been the uterus lining that have enriched itself with blood vessels and blood tissue. So the structure of it is going to relate to its function. The function of the placenta is to transport food, oxygen, and antibodies from the mother to the fetus. So because it is rich with blood or rich with blood vessels, it makes the transport of these substances easy. And because it has a large surface area, the diffusion of those substances will pass through the mother and into the fetus very efficiently and smoothly. The placenta also has what you call microvilli. Microvilli does increase the surface area. I will include a picture of that placenta just so you can have an idea how it looks in the wound. All right, seeing that this is a topic that is coming, you never know if they bring something pertaining to the placenta. Right, so when I do post this slide, you will get a little update because I included more of syphilis, I included more of herpes, I included the diagram of the male and female reproductive system as well. So you would see that. I'll post it up. Any questions with this particular past paper?
No, miss.
You all are very, very quiet today. Very quiet. All right, so I hope that you're learning and you're understanding as we go along. Now we have a few more topics. We have disease, we have pollution, and we have nervous system. I'm not going to rush down these topics. I could actually, because disease is broad. I want to take some time after lunch and go through disease. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to put you onto the Google Classroom. Let me transfer you there. All right, so I'm going to stop this screen. Okay, so when you go to the Google Classroom, now I hope if you're not in it, you can let me know. I'll send you back the link. Right, you should see the class code in the corner here. You just type in this in when you're adding it, or I could just send you the direct link. All right, I'm going to post a question based on reproduction. A little more about that placenta or the development of the placenta and the uterus. You'll have a diagram to label. So this is the microvillus. So I wanted to label this diagram, and I'll also post this question here with a table for you to fill out. So you are now going towards the Google Classroom, and I'm going to post this for you now. All right, so use your screen because you might want to scroll to your pace. Is there anyone not in the group, not in the classroom? So this is another angle in which they could bring reproductive system. They could simply just bring the development of the placenta, the changes that take place in the uterus if pregnancy was to occur. So you need to be prepared for anything. I'll give you a few minutes to go through and then I'll correct it. All right, let me make sure, let me see how much people in this group. They're saying 7. Let me see, Talia, Curry, Christy, Cherise, Aisha, Francesca. I'm not seeing Brent. So Brent, how are you going to get the question? Rizal is also in the classroom. Francesca, yes, you are here in the classroom. Rajiv not in this classroom? No. So Rajiv need to join. Brent need to join. All right, to see that particular question. Right, in the meantime too, I will also upload this presentation in case you need it.
Excuse miss.
Yes, Rizal.
I'm in the classroom, but where you going to get it? Because I went in Google Drive and I'm not seeing, all I see is the classroom, but it's empty. The folder empty.
Refresh the page. Refresh the page.
Okay, thanks.
Since it was just posted, you just have to refresh it. Let me know if you're seeing it. I'll leave it up on the screen as well. But I want you to have access to this because I'm going to pose many other questions for you to do as well.
It's still saying it's empty, miss.
Okay, what you need to do, I'm going to send over this invite to everyone in the WhatsApp group just to make sure you add it to the classroom.
Okay.
Because I'm seeing you all in the list. I'm seeing Rizal, Aisha, Cherise, Christy, Karik. Anybody else not seeing it?
Miss, I'm seeing it.
All right. It's just about refreshing that page then. Right? I'm sending over the link just in case. So when you would have registered, I sent this link just early o'clock so that you will have everything organized. So please make sure, because I will be sending more questions on this classroom. The drive is just for the past papers, by the way.
Miss, I got you with the new link. Thanks.
Okay, great. I'm not getting feedback from the others.
I'm seeing
Yeah,
it.
miss, I have it.
Okay, great. So I'll give you about 5 to 10 minutes. I'm going to also upload this presentation one time before I forget. So this is to use as a guide, this presentation with the concise notes. Right, I add in 2 more things here. The classroom also have the guide posted, okay? So you just have to refresh the page to get the file. Okay, so I'm going to go through the answers now. Right, so I hope that you went through each question. If not, you're just looking at the corrections now. Okay, so the growth and development of an embryo begins immediately after fertilization. Part A, figure 5.1 shows some of the events S to Y between fertilization and birth. Put the events into the correct sequence to have been done for you. So the put in Y, which is fertilized ovum, divides into 2 cells by mitosis. Right, so after fertilization, this ovum divides. And okay, so fertilized ovum divides, then Y, development of sex organs. So let's take a look at all the others that are, all the other changes. So you have embryo forms into a ball of 8 cells. Okay. You have implantation of the embryo in the lining of the uterus. Hormones are released by the mother to start contraction. So you know that coming later on. And then placenta forms, development of the heart. So what is the order that you all have? Now, after the fertilized ovum divides into 2 cells by mitosis, it's going to continue dividing where the embryo forms into a ball of 8 cells. So it will be Y, then W. The embryo now will implant itself in the lining of the uterus, so that's V. Then the placenta forms, so T. So we have W, V, T. All right, and then we have development of the heart, S, development of sex organs. Lastly, you have the hormones are released by mother to start contractions. All right, so I'll repeat. Y, W, V, T, S, X. Lastly, we have U. All right, next question. Any problems here?
No, miss.
Okay. Figure 5.2.
Say no, miss. No problem.
No problem. Great. Right? Just now we're going for lunch, so we need to fuel ourselves with energy. All right. So figure 5.2 shows a developing fetus and part of the reproductive system of the mother. So you have to label these. Let me see. Oh, they're telling you to take the letter from the figure and fill out the table. So you have some of the functions and names of part of the developing fetus and the pregnant mother. One of them has been done. So they label P as the amniotic sac, encloses the amniotic fluid. Okay. So let's just go through what each letter is pointing. So they say P is amniotic sac. Q would be the umbilical cord. R will be the microvillus. M will be the uterus. N will be the amniotic fluid. O will be the cervix. All right. Or you could have, yeah, cervix. So let's see what options they have here. So attaches the placenta to the fetus. That will have been umbilical cord, Q. So you put in Q, umbilical cord. The letter which represents the amniotic fluid would have been N. That fluid is to maintain a safe pH environment. It also absorbs shock. So if the mother was to fall, that fluid absorbs shock, so the fetus is protected. Contracts to push the baby through the birth canal. So that would have been M, uterus. the uterus, the muscles of the uterus is contract. All right. Placenta is noted from this structure, this kind of squiggly shape. This is R. So this is all the blood that has become enriched and thickened. R is the placenta. The function of the placenta during pregnancy is to transport food, water, oxygen, and antibodies from the mother to the baby. The last one would have been O, which is the cervix. So you put in O, cervix widens during the labor to allow the head of the baby to pass. And that is 5 marks. Any questions?
No, miss.
Anybody need me to
No, miss.
repeat anything? Okay. Now we are going to take some time to have our lunch, stretch those legs, get some time away from the screen. You can log off and log back in at 1 o'clock. Give your device some time to cool out, hibernate, charge, what have you. You want to take that time. And when we return, we're going to finish off the 2 topics and jump into the paper 1 aspect. All right, is that clear?
Yes,
Yes.
miss.
Yes, miss.
All right. Have a good lunch. See you at 1 o'clock.